Hello, welcome back. It's Pauline again from PQW, and the second lesson in busting your stash, making a creative vest. In the first lesson we went over and we talked about, purchasing a t-shirt or a wind cheater that's 2 to 3 sizes too big for you, cutting it apart and using that as your foundation to put your wadded strips onto, and we're going to do some weaving in this class. But I just want to show you some ideas of some samples I've been working on, just so that you can see that they don't all have to be the same. The two fronts and the back doesn't have to be the same as each other, and every time you do some weaving they can be all different. And we're just going to do some basic weaving, but you can advance it on to be whatever creation you want, and we would love to see photos so that we can share them out once you get yours done. So here we got a black and white one, because I had this black and white fabric in the cupboard for so long. This is the t-shirt back. You can notice I've done a little bit of quilting on here, but what we've done here is we've woven up the front. So I've just used the two colours, black, white. So I've laid all my strips down as we did in the last lesson, and in this lesson I'm going to show you about the weaving and how to keep it all compacted together, how to make it really, really neat. But you can feel this is nice and padded, it's soft, it's lovely, it's going to be gorgeous to wear. But when I started doing the weaving on this front, I realised I was not going to have enough of the black and white fabric. I had plenty of black, but I didn't have enough of the black and white to do the weaving on every part of it. So what I've done on the back, after I did the one front, I went to the back next. And I just decided to lay the strips down. So these are the strips that have got the wadding in them. You can see the wadding inside here. Put them through the 1.5 inch tool, as we talked about before. Made all the strips. I then put them all down, glued both ends with the glue and pressed it to set the glue. Then I came back and I put little dobs of glue every now and again under some of the strips to hold them tight onto the t-shirt foundation. Then I went to my machine and I have stitched about 1/4 inch in from the edge on each. The black and white I've stitched right on the edge, and we'll talk about that edge stitching in our third lesson. On the black I've stitched in about 1/4 inch. So I've stitched them all down, and I use the monopoly clear thread because I didn't want the black thread to show up on the white. On the black fabric I just used a normal black thread. So I've stitched both sides. Then I came back with one of our quilting templates, and I've just used this shape here, and I've just, with my fabric marking pencil, I've just marked that design all the way down. Then I went back and just sewed on the line. I just put my stitch length up to about 3. I used an open toe foot. And if you've been watching my control quilting videos, you'll know that I release the pressure off the sewing foot, and then I just sew down each of those curves. It's just a wave. And then I'm quilting it right through. I don't know if your camera can pick it up here, but I'm quilting right through to the back, to the t-shirt. Okay, so I'm not going to line this one at all. It will be the t-shirt that will sit against the inside. And if you get little bits of glue onto your t-shirting, don't worry, because that will wash out when we make our garment up. So with the other front, because I didn't have enough left, I just did the same thing as what I did at the back, and that way I was able to completely cover the whole t-shirting. This little bit here is the label that came off the t-shirt, so I'm just going to put that on, and I've got a little bit of glue on there, but it'll wash off. But I just thought that's a bit of fun. So you could decorate these up. You could do some long stitching down here with a contrast thread. You could put some little trims, coloured trims in between. No rules. Just make it up the way you want to go. We'll talk about construction of this, and if I was going to line it, how I would line it, we'll talk about that in lesson 3. So you need to stay tuned. So this one here, once again, I had to decide what I was going to do with it to accommodate the fabric that I used. So I used 2 different fabrics in this one, this large print and then this bright print. They're 2 totally different quality fabrics. I didn't want to cut this large print up too much. I wanted it to be able to be a feature and run the design through. So with these ones here, I cut a lot of my strips 5 inches wide and put them through the 2.5 inch weave it tool. And then I cut some strips 3 inches wide and put them through the 1.5 inch tool. And then all the contrast colour, they were all cut 3 inches and put through the 1.5 inch tool. But I didn't have, again, I really was scraping. I don't think I've even got an inch of this fabric left. I've got plenty of this one left, but I didn't have any of this one left. So I had to really play with it to see how I could put this all together. So this one here, I have woven it all, and you can see I've got the wider strips, lay a wide strip down, a narrow strip, a wide strip, wide, narrow, wide. And then coming down this way, I've done the same thing. And then I've woven the contrast colour through. On this side, I left this side till last, so I had to be really cautious of what I do. So I've put the wide strips down, and then I've put the narrow strips of the contrast down, and then I've woven what I had left, what I could figure out to get through there. Then I've just come back and I've just edge stitched on the side. And because I felt this needed to be stitched down a bit, I came back and I did a bit of stitching with the clear monopoly thread and kind of quilted it in some areas to make that stand out a little bit. And turning it over, I just put the wide strips of the floral down and some thin strips of the contrast, and then I've done like I did in the black and white one. I've just come along and I've edge stitched with a variegated thread 1/4 inch in from each side. And if you look underneath here, I don't know if the camera can pick this up, that was the colour of the t-shirt I've used. It's a rusty colour. But when I made this one up, I thought I'm going to line this one, so I've just found some fabric that I had in the cupboard and I cut out a lining. So, but as I said, in our 3rd lesson we're going to talk about the lining and the binding and different ways that we can finish these off. But they're fun, and as I said, they're cuddly, they're warm. I actually have already washed this one. I put it in the washing machine on a gentle cycle, and then I put it in the clothes dryer to dry it, because the weather hasn't been too good. So threw it in the clothes dryer, it come out absolutely perfect, and I don't think I'll ever have to iron it. So it was fun to make, and I just love the back. I love the way that the big print has really worked here and given me a lovely design that flows through. So play with your fabrics. If you've got to use 20 fabrics in the making of your vest, that is fine. So we'll come back now to this weaving. So this was the part that we left off after our first lesson. We've got our strips laid out on the back, we've glued the ends. Then I'm just going to use this feature floral fabric and do the weaving. Now to do the weaving, it's a tool I forgot to show you at the end of the last lesson. I like to use this little tool because I'm going to put it onto the end, okay, and I'm now going to weave through. It is probably best that we start at the bottom. So this is the bottom edge of my t-shirt, and we're just going to weave this under and over. And this will take you a little while to do this because it's brainless work. You just got to concentrate on where you're at with your unders and overs. And what I'm going to do is show you an important step that you need to take. And by the way, this little tool, the name for that tool is called a bodkin. It's what you'd use to put elastic through anything or cord through anything. So, and I've cut all of these strips to the width that I needed them because it's easier to work with the width than what it is with a big long strip. So this time we're going to go over and under. We're just going to keep working over and under. This is why we needed to glue those ends down. You can appreciate if I had pins in them, the pins would be moving everywhere. Do your bodkin and start your next one. So we just continue all the way up. If you want to do the weaving really close together, just keep working up the surface of the back, or you might prefer to start with the front. It doesn't really matter where you start, which section you start with. And we'll just keep weaving that up. Now as we go, it's going to be important that you know how many, oops, see here, I've got two overs. I've made that one wrong. So this one needs to be under and then over. So that's the only thing you have to be aware of. So we'll just keep going and we'll do the whole lot of this, and then I'm going to come back and show you a very important little tip that you need to keep an eye on as you go. So we're getting up towards the top now, but I just want to come back down the body of the vest and just talk to you about a few things to be aware of. As we go, we want to keep our lines straight. So you will need a ruler close by to make sure that you're keeping your lines running down, running as straight as you possibly can. And then as you're weaving across, just keep an eye on things as you work across. But you don't have to be perfect, because remember we've got all those beautiful curves on our body that will take away a lot of those things that are not quite right. But once we get a fair bit of the weaving done, we now need to make sure that our strips are very close and tight together, because you don't want them to pop out. So this is where I use the awl. And I love the one that's got the really sharp point on it, because I can drag my fabric easy, because if I'm just going to do it with my fingers, I'm going to be messing it up all the time. So we'll just move it up a bit, and we just want to drag the rows down so they're sitting really close together. And what you're wanting is you're wanting to achieve little squares. If you're going to do this consistent weaving, you want all your squares to look much the same size. So you just keep pulling it down, pulling your strips, and you will notice that it starts to get a little bit buckly, so you'll need to just stretch it out a bit as you come down. So it takes a little bit of time here to do this, but it's well worth it. Just keep moving down, and you can see how the awl is just dragging these strips down for me. Very easy. So it's a very handy little tool. I love it when I'm sewing, because I use it as my third hand at the sewing machine a lot of the time to help me hold things down. So now we're going to drag this one down, because you can see we've got a gap of about 1/2 inch here, so we're just going to drag it all down. Just check on our measurements as we go. Keep your eye on everything. Pick up your ruler every now and again and just check that your strips are running fairly straight. Do as much fiddling as you have to, because there's very little sewing in this. Won't take you long to sew it together. It's like very quick. Just drag it down, pull these up. Now the same can happen when we get up around this neckline, that we might have to open out the last strip to fill in the last little bit. So we're going to go over. And if you can't get in there with your strip, don't be afraid to just undo the glue. Okay, it'll pop off for you, just to make it easier to get your fingers and that in there. Oops, here we go. Just need to pull this one off. Just keep going through to get all of that done. Now I'm going to now work on the front, but I've got one front done that I want to show you how I've achieved it, because I just did not have enough of this floral fabric, and I couldn't find anything else in my stash that would blend with it nicely. So I made a decision. Oops, got to go under here. Do you talk to yourself while you're doing things? I'm talking to myself all the time when I'm in the sewing studio. Best company is your own company. So now we're going to just keep all of this tight, and once we get it all done, just keep them. Now what we're going to do next is a little bit tricky. Once you've got everything the way you want it, we're going to flip over. So there's our t-shirt. You can see how it's caught up a bit here because I'd unpicked a bit, so I have to just realign all of this. You know, you can pin, but I think you'll find, like I did when I was making my first one, the pins just kept popping. So I found the glue's easiest, and it's very easy just to re-establish all of this when you need to. And like if you don't want to pull it apart, just get a wet cloth, because remember, the glue dissolves, it's water soluble. So now what I want to do now is iron this all out nice and neat to fill up to the edge. And you remember that t-shirt fabric the stretch fabric will roll back in underneath, so you can see how I'm using my fingers to roll that back out. Yes, the neckline stretched a bit, but that's okay, because when we get it all stitched together onto the woven strips, that stretching is not going to be there at all. And I'm glad this did happen here, because you can understand what we need to do to fix all of this. Right, so now we've got that all pressed out, come back with your glue, and we're going to put little bits of glue here and there to hold this all in place, because we're going to do some stitching in the next lesson. So that would be the next step, to glue all of that, but I'll finish that off a bit later. I want to just show you what I've done with the fronts, so I'll just leave that there. So with the front, I've got my t-shirt underneath. I'm going to lay all these ones down and glue them like I've told you before. Then because this is all the strips I've got left, so I know that I don't have enough to fill the whole front. Just by doing this, I know I just don't have enough fabric. Now I could do a few things here. I could put this on the diagonal, weave up and down on the diagonal. I'm not using the bodkin at the moment because I'm going to make this quick for you. So I could weave like such, and I could leave a gap, but I would need my ruler close by, because I'd want that gap to be the same, and I'd want my angle to be the same, so you could go through and do that. And I experimented with that, but I didn't like it. I just felt it was a bit empty. So what I've decided to do is put the strips down. Oops, put this one up the right way. And I'm going to space them apart. And I worked out that I've got enough to space them the same width of this strip. So as I come down, I measure the strip. It's 1.5. So I'm going to space it 1.5 inches, space 1.5 inches, and I'm going to keep working down to do that. Then I'll glue the ends, flip it over and glue the ends like I've showed you on the back. And there it is. What do you think? So you can see there's my unders and overs. I've spaced it so that I've got that space there is the same as my width of the strip. And that way I now have enough strips to fill in that other front. In the next lesson we're going to talk about some stitching, because there's a few things, because we're sewing through bulk, we don't want to have this moving as we stitch, because remember we've got t-shirt fabric, we've got stretch fabric, we've got wadding that can stretch, and we've got cotton fabric. So we have to be aware of how we set our sewing machine up so we don't get the stretching when we stitch this. Yes, I have drawn the lines on, because I can't sew straight for save myself, so I just used my ruler, and what I've done is I've gone from point to point on each square, because I know that these are perfect squares, because the width of my strip is the same as my gap. But you might have a bigger gap there because you just don't have enough fabric. You might like to do a thick strip, a thin strip, and you might like to do the same up here. You might like to do what I showed you on my black and white one, where I've only just got the strips down. But we want to talk about the quilting and all the different ideas that you've got in the next lesson. And you have so many options. And then we're going to actually make a lining, and we're going to line this little vest and put a binding on it, so you know all the steps that you need to take. Now, if you're making a sloppy joe or a wind cheater into a jacket, remember you can leave it without cutting it through the front. You can leave it and just cover it all. But it looks really wonderful if you do cut the front in half and make it into a jacket. Now with the sloppy joe and that, which we'll do another lesson on that in another time, but you could put bands around the front, you could put bands down a band around the bottom, you could put cuffs on it, you could put a band up the front of it, you could put a collar on it, you could put an inverted pleat in the back. There's so many options that we have using an original garment as our pattern instead of having to go out and find a pattern to suit us. Because, you know, a lot of us wear t-shirts all the time. A lot of us wear sloppy joes or wind shirts all the time. So we've got the options there, and it is much cheaper to buy one of them as your foundation than what it is to buy a pattern. So hopefully you're going to have fun creating till we get back with the next lesson, but I'm going to leave you for now, and I'm going to keep doing the weaving on this one so that I can get it ready to show you in your next lesson. So don't forget, have a look at our website, which is www.pqw.com.au, and look around at the tools, because I think you'll, like me, you'll start to understand that the tools make the job so much easier. I'm not about being here to sell you the tools, but it took me a long time to find the right tools to make the job easier, like the bodkin for weaving through when you're doing the tight weaving, the awl, because it helps me just move these strips around. We're doing it with my fingers. My fingers are in the road all the time. So join us next time for lesson 3. And remember, start making your vest now or your garment, because I want to see photos of what you've created, because I bet you're going to make some beautiful creations. So bye till next time.